What's up, blockchain baddies and crypto kings? How are you? For all you normies out there that are curious, I went ahead and did the research so you didn't have to for the questions that you didn't ask. And today I'm going to go over smart contracts in this little ditty about smart contracts explained. And I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible and make it easy for you to understand. So let's go. Brought to you by the Oracle, CEO of Tapping That Knowledge. Smart contracts. What are these things? Who the fuck cares, right? Why? Why do you care? I'll tell you. So real quick, just to put it bluntly, smart contracts are simply these little instructions, that govern uh, some form of an interaction that live on a blockchain, right? And what does that mean? Well, it's like any contract or any computer program. It's a artifact that says when something happens, do this, but this could be a lot of shit, if that makes sense. For one simple interaction, right? You put your finger on your phone to open it up, biometric reader takes a little tickle of your fingertip, does its authentication, tells the phone that you're the person you're supposed to be. Well, the process that in that little micro interaction there could be considered, governed by a smart contract, right? And there could be multiple smart contracts in that chain of events. And so when you put your finger down, it recorded your finger and said, "Oh yeah, this is Buddy. All is well." Tell the opener to open the gate, basically. And that's kind of how that works. So, you know, touching back on that aspect, these smart contracts, they're these shit. They're these predetermined set of rules, right? So if we go back to that example of the interaction, when you think about like interaction design or what have you, you have to think through the steps. You have to think through the inputs, the outputs, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights. It varies in the context. It could be very simple, or it could be rather complex, right? It also the same here. So in the case of a traffic light, right? Car pulls up, stops on that pad. The pad recognizes that a car is there. There's an automated system in place that senses in all other areas there are no other cars. It quickly changes the light to be more efficient for traffic, right? That could be a scenario where a smart contract comes into play, right? That's an automated, trustless, decentralized, and completely transparent uh, system and use case because, believe it or not, there's actually traffic control centers where, large metropolitan areas have to keep an eye on the roads. And quite frankly, Bobby over there at the desk, he can't be paying attention all the time. Or, is it better for him to be paying attention all the time when there's tasks like this that could be set up in special cases like this? Or there's tasks like I saw an example of autonomous vehicle networks, where smart contracts and blockchains worked together to shuttle vehicles, and the vehicles were able to bid on rights to make lefts and rights, who can do it faster to keep traffic flowing, kind of like pumping that gas when you buy those generative art NFTs on Solana. So, what's so great really is that these smart contracts remove the middlemen and remove the middle women. But I don't want to say it like that because it could remove humans out of the entire process, uh, in terms of like reconciliation and stuff. But it also could kind of remove, systems as well, right? Because decentralization is the push for everything. And once data is more decentralized and easier to access and value can be shared easier, service-based economies can start to be built out at a grander scale. So, that can, those words, man and woman, could be contextual and probably misconstrued. But when you do fire off at the mouth and you fire off at the old deploy button, you got to be really careful. This is why you should always test things. Um, I forget what the engineers call it. I think they're called smoke tests or whatever. But there's a type of engineering practice that they basically build the tests into the coding, and they're testing as they're building, so it's always kind of good to go, and they don't have to worry about fuck ups at the end. So I guess essentially what I'm saying is, if you're building smart contracts, obviously that's important. But if you're not building smart contracts and you're dealing with them in, IDEs, or you're just dealing with them with somebody else for whatever example, I'm sorry. You just got to make sure that they're correct, because once they're deployed, you can't make a change to them and people can see it. And it's people seeing it's not the issue. It's just that it's solidified, solidity. But, did you know that we've been interacting with these things for quite some time, which I find pretty fascinating when you think about it, because a lot of these new concepts today seem so surreal and so grand. But when you take the core concept and you kind of abstract it from the idea, you can think and see, oh, all right, this is really interesting. But in the case of vending machines, it's an automated process. When you put the money in, you push the button, it goes through and makes sure you either have the money or you don't have the money. And if you do, you get your goods. If you don't, you get the money back, and that's the end of it. And that right there is a very simple idea of what an interaction flow is, right? They go through this process. There's a decision that has to be made, and at that decision, there's a tree, a branch off, and there's an either yes or a no or a maybe. And it's kind of like an if, if, when, then. But yeah, so we've been dealing with them for a long time, and we've been dealing with a lot of this stuff for a long time. It's just, I think what nobody ever really talks about is that engineers, technologists, interneters, computer nerds, gamers and stuff, we all get excited for when like new technology comes into play, but the rest of the world doesn't really quite understand. And in this case, blockchain, smart contracts, NFTs, they're changing the way businesses are able to do business, and they're kind of opening that up for a disruption, or the institutional revolution, if you will. So how does the smart contract work? Let's look at it real quick. I want to get you out of here soon. So like I said, straight up front, people have to get together and build out these contracts, whether they're using open source contracts or they're writing them from scratch. If you're writing them from scratch, you better know what you're doing, because once it's up in the cloud, it ain't coming back down. So you got to test it. You got to make sure it's all sorted out, and you just got to make sure it's correct before it gets thrown up there. So those rules are written. The green light says go. And at that point in time, everything is checked and balanced. And if it is clear and everything is validated and everything worked out, then, we move on in the entire process. But as soon as all that happens, it's instantly plopped in a block and added to the chain. And what that means is that, as soon as that transaction, and remember, transaction can mean anything. Transaction could mean me going to the grocery store and literally buying a submarine sandwich, or it could be, you giving me a glass of water. So just whatever it is. But whenever that transaction happens, it gets popped into the blockchain, added to the books, if you will, and the registry of that particular transaction begins. So, they can do a lot of things. It depends what's in the actual contract itself. it depends on the real need for it, and what that person is doing. And it depends on the skill set too, right? Who knows, who's actually doing the job and if they can do it well. But yeah, they can do a lot. They can interact with other things. They can run scenarios. They can remove the need for excessive human resources. There's a ton of stuff, but you just got to make sure it's correct when it's up and running, because there's no going back after that. And if you want to learn more about kind of what keeps it structured, the Byzantine fault tolerant algorithm is something you could look up. I didn't really get into it today because we're not doing that right now. But so what are the values? Who cares, right? Why do we need this stuff? What's the real scenario here? And I would say speed, right? Speed is always going to be a value play in business situations and scenarios. How can you help people, get whatever they're trying to do done faster? How can businesses do business faster? How can people get the goods that they want faster? That's always the thing. And I think in this case, it removes the need for human input on repetitive processes, so you can kind of start to streamline, those areas and bring in more robots, quite frankly. Why not? While we're at it. And efficiency, obviously businesses want to be more efficient. Decisions they make impact their bottom line. So things like smart contracts and advancements in technology always helps businesses. But it's also going to make your life, better as a human, and my life better as a human, because it's going to make things more efficient. It's going to build out, these much more faster, streamlined networks in a perfect world, right? If it all works. This is blue sky, and I'm only barfing back up what is being barfed into my mouth, so that's all I can do for you there. But it saves money, it saves time, it saves costs, it saves the need for, human resources, time resources. It can do a lot of different things. It can save time in reconciliation of a transaction. I mean, the list goes on, really, truthfully. And it's reliable, it's always going to be up. What did they say? 99% uptime? The blockchain will never go down. It's too hard. You got to take the whole thing down. You can't. So there, with this stuff, you don't have to worry about it. As long as the power's on, we're good to go, right? And as long as it's written correctly, everything is good. But shiitake, there's got to be one little mistake. Cons, pushbacks. First things first. Like I said, if you don't get it right the first time it goes up, there it is. You got mistakes, bugs. Because of how this whole thing works, it could be vulnerable. If there is a bug, you don't know about it, somebody finds it, bada bing, bada boom, there goes the whole scenario. You can't get to it fast enough. Garbage in, garbage out, input, output. That's what that means. That's one of my old bosses always used to say. And that goes back to, writing. If the contract isn't written well, it's going to be poo-poo. It's not going to work great. If it's written well, perfecto, I think that's where standardization comes into play and really helps out a lot. But also, it's a pretty immature space. This is very young. It's very new. It hasn't been fully adopted. They're figuring it out. In technology, this happens a lot. People get excited. And they get, ramped up about specific technologies. And they really want to see it get going. But really, it's being used all around the world. It's being used by a lot of big companies. IBM is a big backer. IBM is doing a lot of work with smart chains, blockchain and smart contracts. Home Depot's got it going on. Banking, obviously, insurance, real estate. There's a ton of them. In the article that I wrote on my blog, there is a link to an article from Chainlink where there's like over 70 use case scenarios of how blockchain and smart contracts could go into place. So, if you're an artist, if you're a designer, if you're a creator, if you're a technologist, if you're curious, if you're any of those things, I thank you for popping in on my little bullshit here and listening to what I have to say about smart contracts and smart contracts explained. And, I just think it's always good to be informed. So thank you for your time. Have a wonderful evening. Catch you on the internet, Dane Wasalko.